Today, we're going to unpack Omar El Akkad's incredibly powerful collection of essays. We're going to dive deep into this collision between our personal memories and the harsh political realities of the world, and really explore what happens when the stories we tell ourselves just completely fall apart. So let's get into it. This quote right here, this is the heart of the entire book. It's a really sharp criticism of what El Akkad calls moral convenience. That human tendency to only speak up when it's safe, when there's no risk, and then later on, we all pretend we were on the right side of history all along. Honestly, if you grasp this one idea, you've got the key to everything else he talks about. Now, to really understand his arguments, you have to start where he starts, with his own personal story. It all begins with this idea of departure, of migration, and what it feels like to live between two completely different worlds. He paints this incredibly vivid picture for us. His little daughter, totally safe in their home in Oregon, building a city out of stuffed animals and paper. It's just this perfect image of a protected, innocent childhood, a life he describes as having a stable orbit. And right there, that's the core tension, isn't it? As she's playing, he's scrolling through his phone, watching images of war, of children her exact age being pulled from rubble. He calls this feeling the unbridgeable distance, that huge gap between the safe world his children inhabit and the world of conflict that he comes from. And all of this leads to this key idea he calls elsewhere. See, for his family, leaving Egypt wasn't just about moving. It was about searching for a future they couldn't have back home. It's really the story of so many people who have to leave their homeland behind just for a chance at a different life. Okay, so you have this personal backdrop, right? And it flows directly into his professional life. El Akkad was a journalist for about a decade, covering the war on terror, and that experience really forced him to face the deep contradictions that are just baked into the rules of reporting. And this is where he lays out this fundamental paradox. On one hand, journalism is supposed to speak truth to power, right? To agitate against silence. But on the other hand, journalists are constantly told, be neutral, be objective, don't ever take sides. So the big question is, how can you possibly do both of those things at the same time? And this is where you see that paradox play out in the real world. El Akkad points out how the language in the news completely changes depending on who's involved. When it's a group not allied with the West, the reporting is active, it's clear who did what. But when the violence comes from an ally, suddenly the language gets all passive and vague, buildings collapse, and people perish in blasts, almost like it was a natural disaster instead of a deliberate act. So all of this, the personal distance, the professional contradictions, it's all building toward this central moment, the real core of the book, a profound disillusionment, a point where the ideals you believed in, like a rules-based order, just crumble right in front of you. You can actually trace this journey of his. As a teen, the West just meant freedom. Later, during the War on Terror, he saw what he called deep, ugly cracks in that idea, but he still thought maybe it could be fixed. But for him, the events of fall 2023 were something different. He describes it as a total severance, a complete break. So, how does mass violence even become possible? Well, this is his diagnosis. He argues that basically every single time in history that a great atrocity has happened, there's this quiet, pragmatic voice from the powerful that says something like this: just for a moment, stop believing those people are human. It's a selective suspension of humanity. Okay, so if the first step is to dehumanize a group of people, what's the tool you use to do it? For El Akkad, the answer is simple and it's incredibly powerful. It's language. This whole section is about the specific ways words are twisted to hide the truth and really to allow for complicity. He starts by showing us how rich and layered language can be. Almost like an orchestra, right? Take an Arabic phrase like MashaAllah. It can mean what God has willed, but it can also be an exclamation of joy, like, look at this wonderful thing. Or Inthizai LMR, literally, you are like the moon, but it means you're beautiful beyond words. Language creates entire worlds. But, and this is the crucial part, he shows how that same tool can be used to unmake those worlds. And right here, this is that unmaking of meaning in action. The official vocabulary uses phrases like enhanced interrogation instead of torture, or collateral damage instead of a family was killed. El Akkad argues this sanitized language isn't meant for the extremists. It's for what he calls the liberal, well-meaning, easily upset middle. It's designed to shield them from the ugly reality of the violence they're being asked to approve of. But what happens when that language just stops working? When the reality is so awful that you can't ignore it anymore? Well, that brings us to the final part of his argument, the moral reckoning. the moment where everyone, in one way or another, has to answer for what they saw. You've probably heard this argument a million times, right? The whole lesser of two evils thing. El Akkad totally gets why it's effective. But then he asks this really critical question. Is there a point where that logic breaks down? A point where relative harm can no longer offset absolute evil? And for him, genocide is that point. And in the end, this entire collection of essays, everything we've talked about, it all boils down to this one simple, unbelievably clarifying question. He says this is the question history always asks during a crisis. And what makes it so sharp and so scary is that everybody, whether they like it or not, is forced to give an answer. We're going to end with this haunting phrase from the very beginning of the book. The dead dig wells in the living. It's this idea that the consequences of what's happening now, the memories of those who are gone, they don't just disappear. They carve out something new inside of us. They shape the future in ways we can't even see yet. And it really just leaves us with a question. What wells are being dug in us right now?